Good afternoon. I work at the Università Cattolica in Piacenza. I would like to first and foremost tell you about the project which is called Valore in Vitis, which is a project aimed at within the framework of a European project involving 11 partners, eight of them being wine producers, and Professor Pony from my university coordinates this project. The intent is to enhance the biodiversity for a competitive and sustainable management of winemaking in the Piacenza area in a context whereby climatic and social conditions have changed. Why this title? Well, the title derives from the fact that we want, again, to, as I said, to enhance biodiversity of vine growing in general, and also in relation to new stocks, vine stocks, and resistant hybrid stocks. I will today present to you one of the actions which entails six different actions. I will bring to you the result of the first 3 years of the project. And specifically, I will focus on the aspect of climate change. We know that climate change is causing great problems to vine growing in several wine producing areas. This occurs by means of a number of physiological processes. The most evident thing being that when you have limiting conditions in terms of water, thermal, and radiation stresses, which are multiple summer stresses at high temperature with poor rain levels and a lot of radiation, mechanisms are triggered which reduce the sustainability of the production process in vine growing and wine making, which means accelerated degradation of organic acids, photooxidative degradation of anthocyanins and polyphenols, and dehydration of the berries and bunches. The area of the Colli Piacentini is an area which specifically suffers the effects of climate change, partly because of the characteristics of the varieties of the area. Otrugo is the main white berry variety in this DOC and DOC, and it traditionally is vinified to produce sparkling wines and also spumante wines among them, with the problem that oftentimes it has had a titrable acidity at harvest, which is not in line with the wine type it is proposed for. In addition to that, we also have Malvasia di Candia aromatic with a strong terpenic base. In addition to that, we have Trebbiano, which is an Italian variety, but also international varieties such as Chardonnay and Marsanne. The main goal here is to identify whether, within the context of the vine varieties in the area of Piacenza, we have varieties which can be brought to the fore again and whose presence can be enhanced. There are varieties which were widespread in the past and no longer are, and they are both white and red berry varieties. Out of several reasons, they were increasingly marginalized, so much so that many of them are confined to a few hectares or even stocks. So I will offer you a list of these varieties. Our goal was that of identifying among them varieties which would have a better acidity at harvest for the production I told you about, and that goes for white berry ones, and polyphenols levels are what is considered for red berry varieties. The test occurs here at Albareto di Ziano at the Vitivinicola Mossi estate, where we have 20 genotypes for white berries. Otrugo is present in the collection as a reference for comparison purposes. A number of genotypes which are in the collection come from the Valtrebbia district. You know, the Colli Piacentini area is subdivided into several valleys, each one with its own features. And there we find also these less widespread varieties in the various valleys, one being Valtrebbia. So again, from this valley we have Barbesino, Bucalò, Calora, Lisera, and Sciucaera Bianca. Then we have the Val d'Arda area with its own varieties, one variety from Val Tidone. Then we have other varieties which are more present in the Emilia province and area, which is Besgano, Bianco, Marsane, and Verdea. And we also have in the collection 3 varieties which derive from a mutation of Malvasia di Candia. Here we have 10 genotypes for red berry, and we have a breed of Barbera and Croatina, a cross of Barbera and Croatina, which are the most important varieties in the area. Following the activity of Professor back in the 70s and 80s, so it is sort of widespread. Ervi, which is the result of this cross. Along with Ervi, we have the genotypes that are listed there from Valtrebbia, Darda, and Tidone, plus Besgano Rosso, which is widespread in the entire Emilia area and has been widespread for years now. We used an evaluation method for both varieties, whereby for the white berries we focused on organic acid and the concentration of malic acid, while phenolic ripening and maturation was considered in the black or red berry grapes. In both groups, then, we sought to identify the genetic identity of the variety by means of a profile of microsatellites profile examination. Here you have the results about productivity in the first 2 years of the experiment or test. Results are fairly consistent and significant. Our reference for white or Trugo confirms to be a variety with a good productivity, especially thanks to the size of the bunch, because the number of bunches per stalk is not high. If we analyze the other varieties in the collection, we see that some of them stand out in terms of productivity levels, which might even exceed the Otrugo's productivity level.
Ha un maggior numero di grappoli per ceppo.
Because of a higher number of bunches per stalk, or due to the size, possibly, of the bunch. Otrugo is medium to big in size, and the same goes for the other varieties. We have Bervedino and Barbesino standing out, Calora, Colombina, and Molinelli.
Presentato delle
While other varieties featured characteristics which are not equally desirable in terms of productivity. 1 kilo per plant due to low fertility. This is a result which was found in both years in a consistent way. Among white berry varieties, and many of them are no longer grown, in the case of some of them, it is so that they were not discontinued because of low productivity, because their productivity is very similar to the Ortrugos. And the real fertility on average, which is considered for the entire vine and for base gems, is what you see there, low for Ortrugo, and that goes especially for the base gems. And Molinelli is of interest here in that we have a high fertility, both on average on the stalk and in terms of the base gems. So this is also something that we can tell about Bervedino. Barbesino too is doing well on average, a bit less in the other categories. Preparation and ripening kinetics. Well, here we focus on a number of varieties which were more interesting. One being a Molinelli, which produces very well on average. Here we have a capacity of accumulating sugar, which is more efficient when compared to Ortrugo. So it accumulates sugars earlier on, while the level of titrable acidity at veraison is higher than with Ortrugo, and that is specifically present also towards the end of the ripening period, while Ortrugo goes under 5 grams per liter. So evidently acidity was preserved in a better way in 2017 at least. If we consider the ratio between titrable acidity and soluble solids during the entire ripening period, then we see that this variety has a better ratio, say a better acidity vis-a-vis sugars throughout the ripening period and irrespective of the moment when we harvest. Something similar was seen for Buccalo. We had the same curve in the accumulation of sugars, same concentration in the beginning and at veraison, and then the same trend, a higher trend at the end of the period. This is similar to Molinelli and better than Ortrugo. A third variety that we focus our attention on is Barbesino. Why is it so? Because differently from the other two, we see a sugar accumulation curve which is very similar to the curve of Ortrugo. So the two accumulate in the same way, while the trend of acidity is sort of different throughout the ripening period, in that the acidity level is higher throughout the period. At the end, the levels are similar to what we had in Molinelli and Barbesino, and higher than Ortrugo, which is what we see there. This is very interesting because we assess these varieties in terms of white berry varieties that can be used to produce wine with only that variety, but which can also be blended with other varieties. 2018 was cooler as a year when compared to 2017 at the beginning of the season, and then a high temperature was present throughout ripening. Barbesino had a sugar accumulation curve which was similar to Ortrugo, and titrable acidity was always higher, which was absolutely in line with what we observed during the first year. Then we sought to understand what component of organic acid produces effects on the titrable acidity, and we saw that especially this is due to malic acid for Barbesino, which is positive in terms of possible production types, which is that of sparkling or spumante wines, bubbles, and similar remarks can be made for Molinelli. These are varieties which were harvested simultaneously. In the 2 years we are considering, Otruga has acidity 5 grams per liter, which is low. Molinelli, Buccalò, and Barbesino, especially Buccalò and Molinelli, I would say, have a higher sugar content, and also acidity is higher. Barbesino there also had more sugar than Otrugo, even though that was not much higher, the value, and acidity was higher. In addition to that, Barbesino, Buccalò, and Molinelli have a density of the berries in the bunch which is much lower than Otrugo, which is something which is desirable in order to contrast rot and other possible diseases. These three varieties, in addition to preserving a better acidity level at harvest, also had a higher acidity at veraison. Since organic acids come from the very same base in terms of biosynthesis of organic acids, which is photosynthesis products, there could be a relationship between the malic acid pre-veraison and soluble solids at harvest. Here we have R square of 0.6, which tells us that possibly it could be interesting to have a better understanding of the correlation between the two aspects. This is 2017 harvest data. We sought to subdivide varieties in terms of titrable acidity at harvest and TSS, and we would divide in 4 periods: high acidity, low sugar, and this is especially table grapes, which would be served in canteens, or which would be used to create passito wine, to make passito wines. So we had a fairly high concentration of sugar in that group. Then we have a group of varieties, which you see here in the lower left quadrant, including Ortrugo, where you have low levels of titrable acidity and low values of sugar. Here, bottom right, you have varieties which are not so interesting for bubble wines because they are low in the values desired. But if you consider the names, you understand that it is mutations of Malvasia, and these are varieties which can be used to be dried and make passito wines. Finally, we have a group of varieties which include those we selected earlier on, which have high values of titrable acidity, also when there is a higher concentration of sugar due to ripening. We have Molinelli, Barbesino, Buccalò, and we also have Lecco and Melara, which are 2 varieties which are especially used for passito wine production. They are registered for the making of Vinsanto di Vigoleno, as an example, and other passito-like wines. Now, the red berry varieties. Again, these varieties have these productivity levels. It is not so that their production was discontinued due to productivity problems, in that their productivity is good. They are closer to Ervi, which is our reference variety in the collection, which, as we will see, has a good productivity. We focus especially on Duraguzza, Fruttano, Besgano, which is table grape, and Plissona. This is to be seen both in 2017 and 2018. At harvest, Ervi had these features. It is very efficient in accumulating sugars. In addition to that, there are varieties including Duraguzza and Fruttano, which keep up high concentrations of total anthocyanins and polyphenols. This is consistent in the 2 years. 2018, well, Duraguzza that year had the higher concentration of total anthocyanins, and Fruttano, which has a similar concentration of Ervi and a high presence of polyphenols. Duraguzza especially has a thicker skin berry, the thickest one actually of all these varieties. So this concentration derives from the thickness of the berry. Here we have the evolution of parameters. This is acidity in Fruttano, which ripens later. Sugar levels are more or less the same as others, and the titrable acidity is a bit higher there. It is used especially to produce sparkling wines. Ripening curves suggest that this trend is what is consistent with the production that it is destined to. And then we have a number of varieties which have a low presence of anthocyanins during ripening. Then we have a group with intermediate levels, and then Ervi, Duraguzza, and Fruttano accumulate anthocyanins more effectively, especially Fruttano apparently had not reached the plateau at the moment of the harvest. Now this is sugars. Here you have Malvasia rosa, which is a mutation of the Malvasia that we saw. The color is pink, so it does not accumulate a lot of color. It has this ratio between anthocyanins and TSS. Then we have a group of varieties which is in between, and here we removed CROVA only because graphically we did not want to confuse the representation, but you also have Gravarena, Coravina, and Plissona, which have a similar behavior. In addition to that, there are varieties which accumulate nicely.
Especially fructane. If we had continued with the test and hadn't stopped at the prefixed, preset harvest date, we would have seen a continuation of that curve. The anthocyanin profile in terms of the hue that is imparted to the wines, the color that is imparted to the wine. So we see the concentration of anthocyanins in the various grapes. So there's a group of varietals where the prevalent anthocyanin profile is one where peonidin prevails, others where peonidin and malvidin are in equal amounts, others with a higher concentration of anthocyanins dominated by malvidin. Last but not least, Malvasia rosa. It is a mutation of Malvasia, so it has a terpenic base and hence the flavors. But this has this very nice pinkish color, which allows for the production of different styles of wine compared to those that are traditionally produced using aromatic Malmsey. And its anthocyanin profile is dominated by cyanidin and peonidin, which are the anthocyanins that impart the pinkish color to grapes. Now, coming to the DNA profile, the analysis highlighted the prevalence of microsatellites using the two main viticultural databases at hand, and they showed the correspondences. For example, in the case of Doraguzza, it is synonymous with Mornasca. Calera seems to be a synonymous for Cortese. Bucalò is the same as the Vernassa Bianca. So there's a perfect 100% correspondence. No correspondences, however, did emerge for Molinelli and Barbesino, which were among the interesting varietals, with the exception of what was available as in the literature. In the literature, Barbesino of the Val Trebbia and the Spergola of the Colli Reggiani seemed to coincide. We therefore took samples, various accessions of Spergola, both in the area of Reggio Emilia, and more recently, we also went to work at the nurseries, and essentially none of the Spergolas had the same profile as the Barbesino in our collection. So this assumption needs to be checked again for clarity, because the microsatellite profile does not coincide with what the National Registry states. So further analyses are underway in order to test this synonymy. Other varietals like the Mulinello, the Lecco, Santa Maria, or the Bianchetta have no correspondences in the viticultural databases, and hence they are at an increased risk of genetic erosion. In scientific collections, we found varieties that have been set aside in conclusion over the years, and that they can be put to best use once again now, based on the new needs of this sector, also as a consequence of climate change. Certain white grapes can preserve their titratable acidity. Other indigenous varieties have an increased ability to accumulate anthocyanins and polyphenols with a profile that might be relevant in the future. This is the third year of the project, and soon we'll have to come to terms with possible conflicts or uncertainties in any case that pertain to the identity of the varietals, to then proceed with the necessary developments depending on the case. In other words, understand whether there are any synonymous grapes in the registry, or if there's an interest to register, to record these grape varietals in the registry. So that's all with me. Thank you very much. Let me now leave the floor to Professor Matteo Gatti, who will illustrate another action which took place in the framework of the project Valorim Vitis.